The girls who get it, get it. I don't get it. Sorry. Hi there, my name is Tessa, and since we're about halfway through the decade, I felt like it was about time that I go through all the different fashion trends of the 2020s, so far at least. So I made this little tier list, which honestly took way longer than I thought it would, and we have 5 different categories that something can fall under. We have timeless, TBH, which just means that I feel like it transcends this specific era of fashion and won't be looked upon too poorly. The next tier is we can make it work, which essentially means that for the most part, I think that it's a solid trend, but could definitely feel a little bit dated in the years to come. The next tier is ya basic, which isn't as harsh as it sounds, I swear. I'm mostly using this to refer to a trend that is super mainstream and just very quintessentially 2020s and could fall on either side of the fence. The next tier is please touch grass. This is for the trends that are just very of their time and are just gonna be a really big indication that you probably spend a little bit too much time online. The final tier is Microtrend Final Boss, which is basically going to just refer to sort of the most ridiculous trends, in my opinion, where it's very obvious that this is not going to have a very long shelf life and is essentially only there for like a photo or something. Now, before I start, I do want to say that this is all in good fun. Please do not take it seriously if I like or dislike a trend that you happen to own or wear. Fashion is completely subjective. Everybody has their own opinion, and that's totally fine. This is just mine. And I will say, even with the trends that I might not like, there's probably some outfit that someone could style that would change my mind. Fashion is just one of those things. And I know people are going to ask, but for this video, I'm not going to cover any aesthetics like the coconut girl or coastal grandmother or office siren, only because the trends that I'm talking about today fall into multiple aesthetic categories, so it's just gonna get messy. And I feel like I could do a whole other video that's just ranking the different cores that have come out in the last few years. And I will say I did my best to include as many trends as I could find, but honestly, the trend cycle in the 2020s has moved so quickly that I'm sure I missed a couple of things. We're gonna start off with the bag charm trend, which initially was referred to as Jane Birkinifying your bag. I actually do think that this is a cute trend. I just don't personally subscribe to it, only because I am the type of person to get overstimulated easily, and the idea of a bag that is just making a lot of noise and bumping into things is so stressful to me. The only problem for me is that it's been so commercialized at this point that I feel like it loses the individuality that is the point of the entire trend. But in general, I think we can make it work. The next trend is those 2-piece sets that were all the rage in late 2019, early 2020s. Basically, everybody was trying to dress like Maddie Perez from Euphoria. And a very key indicator of this trend was a lot of cutouts, a teeny tiny crop top, and some kind of fitted pant. And I think it was really exemplified by brands like IMGA and Fashion Nova. If I had been 18 years old when this had come out, I probably would have hopped on board, but I'm an old lady now. For me, I think it falls somewhere in the ya basic category. I feel like a lot of people just wore it and then didn't really do much else with it. The next trend is the Vivienne Westwood orb necklace. I feel like this coincided with the popularity of the Nana manga, and I feel like a lot of people who are trying to edge into the high fashion but alternative space really made Vivienne Westwood a huge part of their personality. I personally really do like Vivienne Westwood's costume jewelry, but I do think it's important to remember that it is costume jewelry, meaning none of it is made out of real gems or pearls or anything like that. But in spite of that, there are different levels of quality when it comes to costume jewelry, and I feel like you can really tell in regard to this trend because real Vivienne Westwood necklaces look completely different than the knockoffs that were all over Amazon and Shein. Like, those looked so cheap and really had the costume part of costume jewelry. The original style that was the orb and the single strand of pearls was so oversaturated that when I do see it, I'm kind of like, oh. But in general, I do feel like Vivienne Westwood has really unique pieces. So I think I'm going to put this in the ya basic category. There are ways to make it look good, but if you've cut corners and gotten the cheap version, it probably doesn't. Next is the strawberry dress. Again, I think that this actually popped up maybe late 2019, but I feel like it really peaked in 2020. Like, it really reminds me of the COVID era. I still love this dress to this day, and I love all of the different colorways that she's released of it, like the watermelon and the lemon and the blueberry. I think they're all so cute, but the knockoffs just looked terrible every single time, purely because the amount of work that goes into creating this dress is not something that you can do for cheap. Unfortunately, it did reach a level of virality that it's kind of impossible to detach it from that association. So I think it's gonna have to go in the we can make it work category. Next is the Hockney dress from House of Sunny. I think that this really took off after Kendall Jenner was pictured wearing it. And I'm not gonna lie, I remember seeing this photo and thinking that I needed just that whole experience. The hat, the dress, drinking wine in front of the ocean. It was just such a vibe. And because of the popularity of this dress, the brand released a bunch of different colorways and patterns. In all honesty, I loved every single one. I did not buy the green version, but I did get it in brown. And I feel like you can actually tell that there is a level of quality that some of the dupes can't really replicate. I do think that the green version got too oversaturated, but any other colorway is totally fine. So I'm gonna put it in we can make it work. Another viral piece is the brown cowgirl top from Brandy Melville. I just remember this being a huge deal, particularly with younger people, like teenagers, college kids. I never really got the hype considering it's just a brown crop top with the words cowgirl on it. But I remember at the peak of this trend, people were reselling these for hundreds of dollars on Depop, which is just crazy. I'm not offended by it, but in general, I think it's pretty basic. Next is the babushka headscarf. Because of the format of this video, I don't have the time or honestly the energy to go into the backstory of every single trend that is on this list. But obviously, as the name implies, the babushka headscarf is inspired by babushkas. And I personally think that it is so chic, so fabulous. I'm gonna put it in the timeless category. Next are platform Uggs. I have been an Ugg hater since the 2000s, mostly because I really associate them with a certain type of girl at my school who were not very nice to me. So as a result, I just have like bad vibes from Uggs in general. And I think that the platform version is just even more ridiculous. I do not like it. I'm gonna put it in the please touch grass category. Next are oversized blazers. Now, I am a huge blazer girl. I have been for years. So for me, this isn't even really a trend. It is definitely more timeless, only because you can really easily dress it up or down. My only problem with the way that it's kind of going in the 2020s is I do think it looks a little bit off when it's just a giant blazer and that's the whole outfit. It just looks like you bought something that was completely the wrong size. But in general, I'm gonna put it in timeless. Next are solid color stockings. Stockings are a big trend in general in the 2020s. This is just the first style that we're going to be talking about. I honestly think that it's very fun and playful and just a great way to add a pop of color to any outfit. So for me, it's going in timeless. Next are phone chains, and I think that Wildflower Cases really pioneered this, but it was all over the place for a solid 2-3 years. I do think it's funny because if you go to Japan, where they still use flip phones and iPhones haven't totally inundated the market, phone chains and charms are still a huge thing. So I think it's funny that we kind of regressed in this sort of like nostalgic way. I do think that this is really cute, but at least for me, I never thought that it was that easy to actually use it as like a wristlet to have your phone just hanging there. And also, I found that anytime I recorded something and I had the little chain hanging off of it, it would make so much noise that any recording I did was just completely invalid. So for me, I'm gonna put it in ya basic. Next is subversive basics. I actually have beef with this trend only because I made a TikTok when it was first going viral where I essentially joked about how it reminded me of that era in the early 2010s when we were all DIYing our shirts and stuff. And then everybody got like super mad at me or saying, no, this is timeless, this is gonna last forever, blah blah blah, it's rooted in the 1980s punk scene. And now that this trend is just completely dead, I really want to just like poke all of those people and be like, yeah, was it timeless? Did it last forever? I will say that I'm not opposed to the idea of DIYing and constructing your clothing. I actually think that that's great. The problem was that people were buying perfectly good stockings and then ripping them up and cutting them for an outfit that you could never rewear because it's just been destroyed essentially. So I am putting this in the Microtrend Final Boss category. Next is this House of CB dress. Every time I see this in photos, I think that it is so beautiful and lovely, but I actually ordered one to try on, and for some reason, it made my boobs look so weird. Like it just squished them like I was having a mammogram or something. So I wound up just returning it because it was just horrible. But I will admit that maybe I am the problem. Maybe I just have weird boobs or something. And I do think that the general silhouette is very timeless, so it's gonna go in that category. Next are the hair money pieces, which is just a very COVID e-girl trend. Like that's immediately what I think of, but not necessarily in a bad way. I do think that it got very oversaturated, but at no point did I ever think, oh, this looks bad. And in all honesty, I guarantee that anyone who did this, in 20 years, whenever you show pictures of yourself to your kids, they're gonna think that you were so cool. So I think this goes in the we can make it work category. Next are jerseys. I personally don't care about any organized sport, so the idea of wearing a jersey just doesn't really appeal to me on that level. Like I'm fine wearing a graphic tee with a rock band that I don't listen to, but I don't want someone trying to talk to me about like football when I can barely sit through 10 minutes of the Super Bowl. The jersey itself is a pretty basic staple piece. I feel like it's purely dependent on how you style the rest of your outfit. So in general, I think that we can make it work. Next are those animal ear beanies. I live someplace that doesn't have any seasons. It's just summer all the time. So the idea of a beanie just is not something that I would ever incorporate into my wardrobe at this point in time. I do think that this is cute in specific contexts, but I feel like it always just reads as very juvenile and childish, which I'm sure people could say is kind of the point, but I think that prevents it from having any real longevity. So I'm gonna put it in the please touch grass category. The next trend is the Lululemon Define jacket. I don't work out, so Lululemon as a whole is just beyond me, but I did not realize how big of a thing these were until I looked into it, and it's crazy. People like fight over specific colorways and just charge crazy amounts for them. Now, I will say that I don't actually hate the look of this. It does remind me a lot of like 2000s hot mom clothing, and I feel like that ties into the whole like Pilates princess movement that's really been on the rise the last few years. Because it is athletic attire, I have to imagine that people aren't just wearing this like once and then tossing it. So for that reason alone, I think I'm gonna put it in the timeless category. Next are puffy heart necklaces. I thought this was so cute when it was first trending, and even when it proliferated the market, it's such a simple accessory that it never really felt too ridiculous. So I'm putting it also in timeless. Next is the House of Sunny cardigan. They were having a really great few years as a brand. And this cardigan, I think, went viral around the same time as the Hockney dress. Obviously, I purchased it. In fact, actually, I purchased two, this one and another one in a different colorway. And I actually still think that they are really cute. I think one of the things about this is just that you have to style it in a different way, which I would argue is the case for basically any trend. So for me, it's going in we can make it work. Next are these buckle boots. I think the original version is from Miu Miu, and then it kind of trickled down into other brands like Jeffrey Campbell and Fry. And I do think they're cute. I'm just not a big boots person. One, because I live in such a hot climate, and then two, because I have really big calves and ankles. Trying to buy boots is just a hellish process in general. So I didn't even think about trying to hop onto this trend. I'm gonna put them in ya basic. Next are the soap brows or the fluffy brows. Different eras have different eyebrow trends. Like the 1920s, it was very thin. The 1980s were very bushy. The 2000s were very thin, and the 2010s were very bushy again. This feels like it's trying to kind of emulate the really big, bushy look, but I think that it looks pretty silly. And I guarantee that some of the people who were doing this are gonna look back in a couple of years and just be astounded by the choice. I'm gonna put it in Please Touch Grass. Next are bubble dresses. I have had a vendetta against bubble hems since I was a child. I just feel like for the most part, they never look good. And that's because you actually need a lot of fabric and just time to construct it in a way that looks nice. But the way that it's trickled into fast fashion just really looks like a deflated balloon or something. They have gone in and out of fashion several times, so they're not as niche of a trend as some other things that have gotten popular in the 2020s, but I'm still gonna put it in the ya basic category. Next are lace tights. Obviously, like any trend, there are highs and lows, and we just happen to be in a high period. But even then, I still don't think that anyone is going to really look back on it too negatively, so I'm gonna put it in timeless. Next are claw clips, and so many different kinds went viral where it was like, you want like a clean girl look or a coconut girl look or whatever. I do think that they are a fun way of accessorizing your hair, but at least for me personally, I was never a huge fan, but maybe that's because I spend a lot of time laying down, and that's not very comfortable if you're wearing a claw clip, so I just never really got on board. Ya basic. Next are jorts. I will say, as someone who is 6 feet tall, it's basically impossible to find a pair of jorts that are actually long enough on me. In general, I do think that it's the styling that makes or breaks this. I feel like you really need to kind of go in a summery direction or like a sporty direction. I don't really think that this works in a more formal context. So I'm gonna put it in we can make it work. Next is the Balenciaga Le Cagole bag. I think that this is so cute. It is very much that 2000s nostalgia resurgence, but I feel like purses are one of those accessories that can really stand the test of time a little bit better than some other things. So I'm putting it in timeless. Next are bleach brows. I think that this is so much fun and so cool. And anytime I've seen someone with bleached brows, they've just been the most gorgeous person in existence. It's probably not going to be around for much longer, just considering how the trend cycle is currently moving, but I think we can make it work for a couple more years. Next are low-rise jeans. Jean styles change all the time, so I was not surprised to see this make a comeback. A lot of the low-rise jeans that are advertised are actually mid-rise, because if you compare them to what we were wearing in the 2000s, they are not that low. So I'm gonna put it in we can make it work. Next is red gingham. I don't even need to spend time talking about this. Gingham is timeless. Next are charm necklaces. Similar to bag charms and keychains, I just really love when things can be creative and personalized. I just think it's a shame that so many people don't actually bother trying to curate any interesting charm necklaces or charms. They just go for something that they bought at Urban Outfitters or something. So I'm gonna put it in ya basic. Next are fuzzy hats. Now I will say I am happy whenever hats are kind of trending, only because headwear is not something that we really incorporate into our day-to-day attire like we used to in the past, but I do think that this was just a little bit silly. I'm gonna put it in please touch grass. Next are cowboy boots. I am more of a combat boot girl myself, so cowboy boots are just a little bit too yeehaw for me. It's definitely not a reflection of my spirit, but I completely understand why they're so popular because they are something that you can kind of just style with multiple things and it usually works out. So I am gonna put them in timeless even if they're not my personal taste. Next is that Realization Par Hercules shirt. I just remember seeing this all over the place, and I'm assuming it's because they probably sent out a bunch of PR packages to influencers and then it just trickled down. It is more interesting than that cowgirl shirt, but overall, still basic. Next are the Chipova Luena pleated skirts. I generally feel like this is going to be looked back upon in a similar fashion as Vivienne Westwood corsets, only because the actual construction of these is so much more complicated than you even realize, and I feel like there's so many fun varieties depending on what your personal style is. So for me, I genuinely feel like there is a timeless quality to them, even if they are kind of edgy. Next are ruffly socks. I feel like this really picked up steam during the early COVID era and is still very much around today. It does feel very juvenile to me, which makes sense considering one of the biggest trends of the 2020s has been that coquette aesthetic, but I do think it's going to be thought of in a similar way as thigh highs from the early 2010s, so I'm going to put it in ya basic. Next is the Mugler catsuit. This design was really popularized by Casey Cadwallader, and it's basically all he put out for like his entire tenure at Mugler. I do think that for celebrities, for performance attire, it worked really well, but as day-to-day fashion, I'm just not really sold on it, so I'm gonna put it in Please Touch Grass. Next are grommet belts, which have been a staple of alternative fashion for decades at this point. I do think that they read as more edgy, but for the most part, still timeless. Next are rosettes. I feel like I expected this to be a way bigger trend than it really was. Like, I feel like there were a couple of months where it was everywhere, like you could not escape rosettes. And then one week they just completely disappeared. For this, I think it's completely dependent on styling, so I'm putting it in ya basic. Next are prairie dresses. These really peaked during COVID as part of like an escapism movement. And I think gunny sacks were kind of like the coveted prairie dress, but obviously every single brand just started pushing them out. As someone who loves a flowy dress, I'm putting this in timeless. Next is cow print. This definitely popped up in 2019 originally, but I feel like it reached its peak in 2020. Not all cow print is created equal. Like, there are definitely some styles that look a little bit more rustic and natural, and I feel like those are the ones that are going to be able to be reworn over the next few years. But the other type of cow print, I'm not really sure about. I'm gonna put it in ya basic. Next are these poster girl mesh dresses. Very sexy, very flirty, very fun. I think we can make it work. Next are fun scrunchies. Early in COVID, scrunchies in general just kind of came back as like a 2000s 80s revival, and then they got really elaborate in more recent years, but I feel like they're not going to last very long, so I'm going to put them in Please Touch Grass. Next are sheer dresses. I think that this is so sexy, but also still sophisticated in a way, and it's definitely not something that, you know, you can do all the time, but for certain occasions, it definitely works, and I don't think that it's going to be super offensive to look at in a couple of years, so I'm going to put it in timeless. Next are capris. Again, as I said, I have pretty big ankles and calves, so for me, capris are just not in the cards. I do think it's dependent on whether or not it's gone in a sort of 1950s pinup direction versus a 2000s direction, so I'm gonna put it in We Can Make It Work. Next is the Powerpuff Girl heart print. Again, this is just very COVID era. I feel like we had phone cases and sweaters and dresses and just everything had this heart print. And even as a Powerpuff Girl fan, it reached a level of oversaturation where I was just like, enough. I'm gonna put it on Please Touch Grass. Next are the Marc Jacobs Kiki boots. I think there were a couple of tweets and Instagram posts that went super viral, and since then, the Kiki boots have just been coming back every so often. I think they're fun, so I'm gonna put them in We Can Make It Work. Next are the Jerf Avenue pajamas. I am a pajama girl, but these never really tempted me, and I'm not really sure why, but I definitely know that they had a moment. People were doing all sorts of like Jerf Avenue hauls and like collections, and then of course they got duped and people stopped buying them. I'm just gonna put it in ya basic. Next are sequins. For me, I don't even really consider sequins a trend, only because I really associate them with summer and the beach, which, as I mentioned, is year-round for me. Sequins are timeless. Next are the Aritzia Melina pants. These were such a coveted item for like 2 years straight, and I never understood why, because they were just faux leather, aka plastic, which means that they were going to fall apart very quickly. They were going to be hot, sticky, just unpleasant. So I'm going to put this in ya basic. Next are AirPod Maxes. Usually I would not include technology in this sort of thing. It's like saying, oh, iPhones are trendy. But I feel like everybody started getting AirPod Maxes, and it wasn't so that they could have a better listening experience. It was so that they could look cooler. So I am putting it in ya basic. Next is the Balenciaga City bag. As I said, I feel like bags have a little bit more longevity than other trends, and the fact that this was so huge in the 2000s and has come back again, I think is a really good indication of that. And also, I just like the fact that it's big, so I'm putting it in timeless. Next is the green and pink crochet halter dress. I don't know what brand originally started this. All I know is that they were duped to the high heavens origins, and it was just all over for like 2 summers straight. And I think it really was the precursor to the crochet trend. But the nature of crochet really requires time, which these dupes really didn't bother doing. So they really just looked very cheap. So I'm gonna put it in Please Touch Grass. Next are ballet flats. So I have pretty wide feet, so that combined with the wide ankles makes me in ballet flats just a really bad combination, which is a shame because I actually think they're really cute. So I'm gonna put this in timeless, even though I cannot enjoy it myself. Next is the neck scarf trend, and there is a lot of discourse online about this right now, with people saying that the trend is not acknowledging its South Asian origins, which I think is a valid criticism. For me, I think it's really cute, and it just reminds me of like 1990s prom clothing or 1950s formal wear. Next are sweater vests. Bonus points if they were argyle. I don't think that sweater vests are necessarily out of fashion at this point. I think it just depends on what the pattern is. So I'm gonna put it in We Can Make It Work. Next are Adidas Sambas. I am a Nike Cortez girl through and through, so I have not personally hopped onto the Adidas Sambas train, but I totally get the appeal. Like, the silhouette is very trendy and they have a lot of different colors, so I'm gonna put it in We Can Make It Work. Next is the Realization Par yellow floral dress. Again, I feel like this was just everywhere, and it really developed this association with like European travel, which I feel like post-COVID was really like the pinnacle of luxury, and the print definitely trickled into just a bunch of fast fashion brands, but for the most part, the original is still pretty timeless. Next are pearls, just in general. You can find pearl details on just about anything nowadays. Necklaces, purses, dresses, anything. And as a lifelong pearl lover, I'm not going to complain, they're timeless. Next are the Birkenstock clogs. I do own a pair of Birks myself. They are not clogs, but I do understand the appeal. They're comfy, they're easy to slip on. I think a lot of people are kind of leaning into the chefy vibes because of like the bear and stuff. I think we can make it work. Next are fluffy bags. The original ones that really took off were by Unif, and I do own 3 of them, but I will say I still use them to this day. Good for like a more fun and casual occasion, so I'm gonna put it in We Can Make It Work. Next are bloomers, and I am gonna lump in boxer shorts and just any kind of brief that has gotten popular in the last few years. So I do prefer certain styles more than others, but in general, I just feel like it almost looks like when you play The Sims and you like randomize when you're in CAS, like the outfits just look a little bit confused. You know what I mean? So I am gonna put them in Please Touch Grass. Next are the chunky resin rings. I feel like in its early stages, this actually was really fun and unique and creative, and was just like a very nostalgic kind of feeling. But then what always happens, happens. I think it's gonna be in Ya Basic. Next are front tie tops. You can find this in so many different styles, so I almost feel like it's unfair to include it, but it's definitely something that I consider very ubiquitous to the 2020s. So I don't really think that the tie front part is what's going to not really age well. It's just the actual style of whatever top has it. So I'm gonna put it in timeless for now. Next is the 13 going on 30 dress. I love the original by Versace and the version that got made for the movie, but this like cheap knockoff actively upsets me, and I don't even know why, because there are so many outfits that have become like Spirit Halloween costume-fied, and I just feel like it looks really cheap and the colors aren't even bright and fun. I'm gonna put it in Microtrend Final Boss. Next are corsets, which I feel like are one of the defining trends of the 2020s, and I am lumping together all the different styles, so corsets, stays, bustiers, etc. I feel like this is so dependent on the actual quality of the corset and just what it looks like and its design. For instance, that Amazon corset that everyone wears for Halloween, I think looks so cheap, not only because of like the structure, but the brocade fabric just doesn't look very nice. Like, it almost looks like wallpaper. So I'm gonna put it in Ya Basic. Next are food motifs. I've done 2 food related video essays at this point, so you should know that I really like food, and I have actually been wearing food motifs probably for the last decade or so. So for me, it's definitely not as much of a new trend. It's just a lot easier to find things that I like now. So I am gonna put it in timeless, even though it's definitely not. Next is hibiscus print. I think that this was popularized by that Vietnamese brand Oh Mighty, and then it just trickled into everything else. I live in hibiscus territory, so in theory, I love this, but I feel like the combination of the stretchy polyester and the neon just looked really cheap, so I'm gonna put it in Please Touch Grass. Next is the quilted bag from Kos. It's just a good staple bag. There's really nothing about it that screams that it's gonna go out of fashion too quickly, so I'm gonna put it in timeless. Next are the silver Y2K sunnies. I feel like this is so dependent on the person wearing them because sometimes they look cool and then other times it's just giving try hard. So it's gonna go in ya basic. Next are those country t-shirts. I think the most popular ones are Brazil and Mexico. There's really nothing about these that are that offensive to me, but they just are everywhere right now. So I am gonna put it in ya basic. Next is the diesel purse. Unlike some of the other bags I've talked about, I feel like this is a little bit too rooted in 2000s nostalgia and futurism, so I am gonna put it in We Can Make It Work. Next is zebra print. I do think that this looks a little bit more high fashion than the cow print, but as a whole, still pretty basic. Next are track pants and shorts. I don't hate this, but I think my issue is that it should really stay sporty. Whenever people try to dress it up, I just get confused. So I'm gonna put it in ya basic. Next are Maison Margiela tabbies. I already know what the comments are gonna say. They're gonna be like, the girls who get it, get it. I don't get it, sorry. I do genuinely feel like these existed in a very interesting fashion space when they were originally created, but now they've become a symbol of like fashion snobbery. And I generally feel like we're gonna look back at these the same way we looked at those heelless shoes in the early 2010s, where it's just a bunch of hooves everywhere. Please touch grass. Next are gloves. I actually do really like this trend. I just think that the problem is that in a lot of cases, it's not really styled in an interesting or fun way, which is the case for a lot of celebrity glove looks. So I think if people are being adventurous, it works, but sometimes it doesn't. Next are those wide headbands. As you might be able to tell, I don't have a particularly big forehead. In fact, some people might say it's a 3-head. And I feel like this style of headband really benefits from having all of that space, but I'm still gonna put it in We Can Make It Work. Next are the Versace platform shoes. These had such a huge moment and were duped by basically everybody. And I will say I did try these on in stores and I just couldn't bring myself to buy them because it just felt like I was going to like fall and kill myself. I think they might become the Jeffrey Campbell Lita of the 2020s, which leads me to believe that I need to put them in ya basic. Next is the Skims dress. I mean, it's Kim Kardashian, so it needs to go into ya basic, right? Next are the Marc Jacobs tote bags. I really don't understand the hype behind this because I just find the thing that says tote bag on it to be so cheap and tacky looking. So I'm gonna put it in Please Touch Grass. Next are naked wolf boots. I think Sabrina Carpenter wore these on one of her tours, and I think that's how they got really popular. But every time I saw them, they just looked like such a pain to put on, even though I will agree that the silhouette is very cool and edgy. So I think I'm just gonna put it in ya basic. Next are micro bangs / baby bangs. This is very similar to bleached brows, where I would never do this myself, but every time I've seen someone do it, I feel like they look great. So I am gonna put it in We Can Make It Work. Next is the exposed seam trend. I hated this because it just looks so cheap and unfinished, and it was just a way for all these fast fashion companies to continue cutting corners, so I'm putting it in Microtrend Final Boss. Next are barrel jeans. Like I said, the silhouette of jeans changes all the time, but I don't think that this is going to have mainstream longevity, purely because I've noticed that anytime someone has these, they only ever stand or pose in one specific way, as if they know that it looks ridiculous at any other angle. So I am gonna put this in Microtrend Final Boss. Next are the Miu Miu / Bayonetta glasses. So just like a lot of trends, certain glasses go in and out of fashion all the time. You might remember in the 2010s that horn rim glasses were all the rage. I don't mind this current shape. My only thing is that a lot of people are not realizing that glasses are very dependent on your facial shape and the balance of like your nose and your eyes and head and everything. So a lot of people are buying this type of glasses, and it just doesn't really work for everyone. Like, you have to have a very specific face. And I think the fact that so many people are just blindly wearing these really shows that there's a lack of discernment when it comes to certain fashion trends nowadays. So I am gonna put this in microtrend. Next are the Solomon hiking boots. Like I said, I do not exercise, so the idea of wearing hiking boots casually is beyond me. I personally don't even think that these are cute, so I'm gonna put them in microtrend. Next are bows. Obviously, everybody loves bows, but I do think that they've reached a point where it's almost like a caricature of wearing bows. I think we can make it work, but we gotta start being a little bit more picky. Next is rhinestone trim. When this is done well, it can be really beautiful, but most of the time it just looks bad. Like you've just glued on random sparkly things and called it a day. I'm putting it in Please Touch Grass. Next is fur trim. Again, I think this was popularized by House of Sunny and their cardigans, but you can find it honestly on any variety of clothing. I do think that this is one of those cases, whether it's feathers or fur, that the quality is so important. Otherwise, it just looks like a ratty old teddy bear. So I am gonna put it in Ya Basic. Next are teeny tiny rompers. I think Sophia Richie wore like a hot pink Chanel one, and then it really spiraled from there with like Fashion Nova and House of Sunny and Princess Polly just like releasing a bunch of these teeny tiny little rompers. I think that this was really only around for maybe like one summer, but I am gonna put it in microtrend. Next are butterfly clips. I have so much nostalgia for this trend because it really reminds me of being like a kid, and I think that was a big part of its popularity because I think it peaked during COVID where we were all kind of like looking for something fun. And I do feel like depending on the occasion, they can still work, so I'm gonna put them in timeless. Next is double denim, another 2000s trend. The concept of double denim is actually very versatile because you can go with skirts or jeans, jackets or vests. It's really very broad, and I feel like that's why I'm going to put it in timeless. Next is the Miu Miu mini skirt. I saw so many people cutting up their pleated tennis skirts to try to like recreate this micro mini look, and it really just feels like one of those look how skinny I am type of trends, so I am putting it in microtrend. Next are the Gucci jelly heels. I did try these on, and holy crap, they were not comfortable in the slightest. Anyone who actually wore these out, I have no idea how you did it. I am gonna put it in Please Touch Grass. Next are leather bombers. I like a leather jacket in general, so for me, I don't really have any complaints. I'm gonna put it in timeless. Next is the Prada nylon bag. I do actually own this. It was one of my first like your YouTube channel is doing well purchases, and I will say in hindsight, I do regret it, only because it's very expensive for nylon. Some of the other bags are made out of other materials like leather, where you can actually justify the price, but this just didn't make a lot of sense, and honestly, I barely use it. In honor of myself falling for a trend, I am going to put it in Please Touch Grass. Next is the blue Cupid print. Again, very early COVID era, trickled into everything and was very popular with like mesh tops. I feel like it's really the pinnacle of being basic. Next is checker print. I love this. I still do to this day. I have so much stuff around my house that is checker print, and I feel like it's come in and out of fashion so many times, like the 1960s and the 2000s, that there is more longevity than you would think. So I am gonna put it in We Can Make It Work. Next is the Selkie puff dress. And I actually think this might have the most longevity of any of the trends we've talked about, only because I still continue to see people wear this dress over and over and over again. And I actually think that's great because it's showing that there is something about this design that people continue to gravitate towards. So I am gonna put it in We Can Make It Work. Next is a balaclava. Like I said, I live someplace hot, so please take any of my opinions on cold weather clothing with a grain of salt, but I think this looks ridiculous. I think that the only reasons you should be wearing this is either if you're going skiing or you're about to rob a bank, and that's it. I'm gonna put it in microtrend final boss. Next are the Staud beaded bags. I do also own this. I think I only used mine twice, and then all of the beads started to fall out, which sucks. And I've actually purchased a similar bag from a different company that was about half the price, and it has held up way better. I don't know, maybe I just had a bad bag, So I feel like I can't put this any higher, even though I do really like the designs that they're coming out with. So I am gonna put it in ya basic. Next are neckties, and I do generally feel like there is a versatility here that is going to help it as the years progress, because you can go with any pattern or color, and you can even tie them in different ways. And I've seen people use them as scarves, as bows. So for me, I think we can make it work. Last but not least is leg warmers. I think that the actual silhouette is pretty fun, like it's not your standard sock or stocking. So I am gonna put it in we can make it work. That is it for this video. Thanks for watching. It was definitely longer than I expected it to be, but I suppose that makes sense considering I talked about almost 100 different trends. But do let me know if there are any that I missed, and I will be linking this list in the description. So if you want to, play and rank yourself, go ahead. I will see you next time. Bye.